Hola, it's Beto here, your daily divinity coach, here for episode number 43 of my weekly series, Sunday Weekly Revival. I'm going to go ahead and tag a few friends so we can get a live audience going. If you're watching the recorded video, go ahead and feel free to fast forward a few minutes while I tag a few friends and we get a live audience going here. So again, just tagging a few friends, get a live audience going, just letting some people know that we're active and we're ready to rock and roll. Let's see, Paul looks like he's around. Awesome. Just tagging a few friends here. Yeah. Let's see if we can get an audience going. Awesome. See who else might be watching live. I think that about does it. So I'll go ahead and there, I think. Oh, look, we already got some people. Awesome. My sister's watching. Excellent. Hello. I got lots of people joining. This is awesome. Excellent. Well, happy Sunday to everybody. I'm Beto, your daily divinity coach. First of all, as is my custom, shout out to Tia Malu. My Tia Malu calls me every Saturday night and says, Beto, mijo, don't forget my shout out. So there it is. Shout out to Tia Malu. Thank you, everybody, for joining live. And for those of you watching the recorded video, happy Sunday. Thanks for watching the video. I appreciate you. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to share with you. Again, my name is Beto. I'm your daily divinity coach. This is episode number 43 of my weekly series, Sunday Weekly Revival. This episode is entitled Pedagogy of the Oppressed, the 1970 World Cup, y la Fundación Espartanos, or the Spartans Foundation. Today is Sunday, May 23rd, and I'm very excited to be here with you today. I'm here every Sunday for Sunday Weekly Revival. With the exception of the first Sunday of the month, I'm still here with you the first Sunday of the month. But instead of doing Sunday Weekly Revival, I do my monthly mailbag, which is an opportunity for you to pre-submit your questions. And I ask you to pre-submit your questions because I like to provide thoughtful responses. So the first Sunday of every month, the content is your questions and my responses. But for Sunday Weekly Revival, I prepare original content. And I'm so grateful for your time that I want to make sure that I give my best. So I do hard work to make sure that I'm prepared and give you my best. So that's how I feel about that. I'm just so grateful for this opportunity to share. I'm just going to talk a little bit about myself, give people some time to join. So if you're watching the recorded video, you've already heard my introduction. Feel free to go ahead and fast forward a few minutes. As Daily Divinity Coach, I post a paragraph every day, Monday through Friday, here on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I do my live Sunday shows that I just talked about, and I also do a live Saturday show with my co-host and collaborator, Dr. Michelle Yanez, and we call that show Live and Unscripted. And we do it 2 Saturdays a month, and we reformatted it so we have live guests who are now bring their content to our shows. And we did one on, do-it-yourself Mother's Day baskets, which was a blast. We did another one on You Are What You Eat, which was a blast. And we're going to do more of those shows. And it's a lot of fun. They're unscripted, so we don't know who's going to say what. And that's what really makes it compelling. And it's just a blast. We're always smiling and laughing and delivering a positive message. Everybody who comes on the show has a positive message. You know, our kids, I'm a single dad. Michelle's a single mom. Our kids watch, right? So we want to deliver something positive, PG, right? PG, that's going to help uplift people and provide some good information as well. So make sure you tune in. Just keep an eye out when I put out the announcement for the next one. I also produce bracelets, so if you haven't received your free set of bracelets, please reach out. They're very colorful, the new ones. I got the originals as well. The new ones read Liberated, Limitless, and Ageless. They're a lot of fun. They're awesome. I produce them myself. I give them away for free. Shipping always free in the U.S. If you're abroad in Europe or North America, also free shipping. Unfortunately, it's cost prohibitive to ship to like India or Brazil. I wish I could, but it's just too cost prohibitive. But if you're in Europe, North America, and especially in the U.S., no excuses, reach out. It's free. A little bit about my background. I was raised by a mother. Starting at the age of 10, she started tutoring me in the law of attraction, how to speak things into existence, scientific prayer. She was all about that, and started tutoring me as a young child. I went to seminary. I'm from California, Atlan. I live out here in Boston now. I went to Harvard Divinity School, where I studied social justice and liberation theology from my advisor, Cornel West, amongst others. I also have a background in Mesoamerican studies, studied with David Carrasco here at Harvard when I was at Divinity School. Also, the great El Maestro Andres Segura from DF, from Mexico City, the Mexica, right? The Mexica Azteca oral historian and philosopher, taught us our oral history when I was a young student and an activist. So I've had great teachers in my life, and so this is giving back. So enough about me. We got a lot of content to go to. We got a great crowd, and again, thank you for joining. We're going to start off by talking about Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire was born in 1921 in Brazil. Paulo Freire is a Brazilian philosopher and educator. Yeah, we got an educator on my show. Usually we're talking about musicians and artists and stuff like that. Paulo is special. He's the founder of critical pedagogy. What is critical pedagogy's aim? Its aim is liberation from oppression through an awakening of critical consciousness. What does that mean? Well, I'll define it in pop culture terms for you. Remember I did an episode, and if you haven't, there's a library of episodes. You can go back and watch it after this show. Bob Marley's Redemption Song. We talked about the lyrics for Bob Marley's Redemption Song. And part of the lyrics go like this: emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. That's basically, in a nutshell, what critical pedagogy is. Freeing your mind from mental slavery by awakening critical consciousness. About Paulo Freire's family background. In the 1920s, he was born into a middle-class family. But when the Great Depression hit the U.S., right, the economic depression, it spread across the globe, and it hit Brazil, and it affected Freire's family. And they went from being middle class to poor, like hungry poor. He would at times steal chickens from neighbors, land to help feed the family as a child. He ended up falling, even though genius, right, very smart, he ended up falling 4 grade levels behind in school because he was hungry. He said this: I didn't understand anything because of my hunger. I wasn't dumb, right? He wasn't dumb. He's smart. He was hungry. And so anyway, the Depression ended. His family got back on their feet, and their economic plight turned, and they became middle class again. But nonetheless, Freire never forgot those feelings of hunger, right? And what it did to him. And as a result, he dedicated his life to improving the lives of the poor, which is what righteousness is, right? We talk about this. What is righteousness? It's about dedicating yourself, having that love for the poor, the oppressed, the imprisoned, political prisoners, for what the great teacher called the least of these, right? That's what righteousness is. And that's what Freire did. He dedicated his life to the least of these, the poor and the oppressed. Freire actually studied the law. I don't know if you saw my post recently, but my firstborn son, Wisdom, graduated law school just recently, University of San Francisco. Very proud of him. Freire graduated law, right? He studied law. He actually was admitted to the bar. My son right now is studying for the bar exam. But he never ended up practicing law. And excuse me, I'm just going to take a sip of water. It was really hot yesterday on the rugby pitch. My son was playing rugby yesterday. So I've been thirsty all morning. His team won. It was a really great game. He's actually playing another team that had his friends from his club, because he plays club rugby and high school rugby, and so they took pictures after the game and had a lot of fun. So very highly competitive. But anyway, back to Paulo Freire. So he never practiced law. He went into education, right? He's an educator. So at that time in Brazil, there's a requirement to vote in a presidential election, and the requirement was literacy. You had to know how to read. And so what Freire did is he put his theories into action, and he demonstrated a wildly successful literacy program. He took 300 sugarcane workers, harvesters, and he taught them to read in just 45 days. We're talking adults who didn't know how to read. Freire gets in there, 45 days later, these 300 sugarcane harvesters are reading. Miraculous, right? They're reading and voting, right? Miraculous. Brazilian government's like, whoa, right? Game changer. And so they set out to, they approve and set out to scale out Freire's program, his literacy program, his initiative. And so they create thousands of what they call cultural circles across the nation, right? They're gonna teach folk, adults who don't know how to read. They're gonna vote in the election, right? Democracy is gonna flourish. But now enter the lords of scarcity, right? The party poopers, right? They always come along, right? These party poopers, the lords of scarcity. If you've ever watched any of my episodes, they always out there and they come along. So anyway, 1964, there's a coup d'etat in Brazil. The Brazilian armed forces, right? The military, supported by the U.S. government, by yours and mine, U.S. government. There's a coup d'etat, and they overthrow the democratically elected President Goulart of Brazil, who is part of the Labor Party. It's like the lords of scarcity are, people are learning how to read, right? There's democracies flourishing, the Labor Party's in charge, and can't have it, right? There's too much abundance. Too much abundance, we're scared. We're the lords of scarcity. We can't have too much abundance. Unless it's ours, then it's okay, but not for everybody else. So they rain on the parade. What happens with Freire? Well, they end his literacy initiative, right? The lords of scarcity can't support a literacy initiative. It can't be done. So anyway, they end his initiative, and they ended up imprisoning him. They put him in prison for teaching adults how to read. Unbelievable, right? He spent 70 days in prison for this. He ends up in exile. They didn't kill him, so he ends up in exile. And while in exile, there in South America, in 1968, his seminal book, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, right? Part of the title of this episode was published in Portuguese. And then the next year, Harvard, which, they're always looking for the smartest and the brightest, right? They find Freire, they offer him a visiting professorship. So he comes from South America. He's in exile, comes from South America, here where I live, Cambridge to Boston, and teaches at Harvard University, right? Arguably the top university in the world, right? From political prisoner, exile, now he's at Harvard, right? That's the divine. That's how the divine works, right? He was where he's supposed to be, right? And on the stage, right? Because he's got great information to share about abundance. Anyhow, in 1970, right? So the year after he's teaching at Harvard, Pedagogy of the Oppressed is released in Spanish and English. So now it's not just in Portuguese, but Spanish and English. And today, over 1 million copies have been sold. It is the number 3 most cited book in social studies. It's a game changer, right? It's a game changer. So after his year here in Cambridge and Boston, right, teaching at Harvard, he ends up going to Geneva. He went to Switzerland, and he was the education advisor for the World Council of Churches. You see his, what he called praxis, 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 which is, what is praxis? It is this. It is taking action, right, your practice, right, your action, and having critical reflection on it, right? So you're acting, right, like you're doing your literacy program, or you're learning how to swing a golf club or whatever, and then you're thinking about it. So you're not just doing it, but you're using your mind, you're thinking about it. That praxis it's both and, not either or, both and. So anyway, there working with the World Council of Churches, that really, the liberation theologians, right? We talked about this with the Catholic Church, the Pope, the current Pope. He was highly influenced by the liberation theology movement of that time, which became very popular in Latin America. That praxis was adopted. They loved it. They embraced it, right? The liberation theologians. So that's what happened there. So anyhow, in 1980, it's now 1980. Democracy is returning to Brazil, and Paulo Freire ends up moving back to Brazil. And in 1988, he was appointed the Sao Paulo, right, the big city, right, the metropolis there in Brazil, Sao Paulo, the municipal secretary of education. So he's back where he should have been a long time ago, but the Lord's scarcity messed things up. The divine still intervenes, but now he's back in Brazil as the minister of education or secretary of education for Sao Paulo. And then, unfortunately, he ends up passing away later on, so he's not roaming the earth anymore. But he was back where he was supposed to be. There's a lot to talk about in Freire's book, right? Freire's book, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. But I want to specifically talk about his reflections on the oppressor, what he called the oppressor, what I call the Lord of Scarcity, right? And so a couple of quotes here. So Freire says this: for the oppressors, aka Lord of Scarcity, to be is to have. And he adds this: even at the cost of the oppressed having less or having nothing. See, it's all fueled by materialism. Remember I did that episode on the Hopi, right? And the Maya, the Mexica. The Hopi specifically talked about the fourth world and how it's all about materialism. That's what creates all this division, right? It's the Lords of Scarcity wanting to have, right? And to have more, even if some folk have less or nothing. Freire got it, right? He understood that. He says this also. He says, money is the measure of all things for the oppressor, the Lord of Scarcity, and profit the primary goal. And then he goes on, right? He goes on and says, the oppressor, right, himself, and I add herself, because we talked about Margaret Thatcher, right? There's Lords of Scarcity that are women too. They're dehumanized. They're dehumanized because they dehumanize others. So it's a lose-lose situation. Just because you have don't mean that you become more human. No, it actually means you become less human if it's at the expense of other people having less or having nothing, right? And Freire got that. So it's a lose-lose situation. And this is the quote that I really want to highlight. I really want you to get. It's this. Freire says, oppression is nourished by love of death, not life. Okay, I'll say it again. Oppression is nourished by love of death, not life. You see, the Lords of Scarcity are all about aging and death. That's what gives them fuel. That's what drives them. That's what gives them nourishment. That's what brings nourishment to their bones. You understand? And as middle class folk and poor folk, for whatever reason, we emulate the Lords of Scarcity. We have this thing inside of us where we actually emulate them. And that's why immortality hasn't manifested yet. It's coming. The fifth son is emerging. But when we emulate them, what we're doing is we're giving power to aging and death, right? The ancient text says that we have the power of life and death in our tongues. By emulating the Lord of Scarcity, we're not going the side of life, right? We're going the side of death. So we got to emulate people like Paulo Freire, right? Like the righteousness, right? He's a righteous dude, right? Teaching poor folk how to read so they could vote. Righteousness, right? We got to emulate people like the great teacher, right? And we got to emulate people like Nelson Mandela. Because Nelson Mandela, what did he say? He said resentment is like poison. He was a political prisoner. He ends up becoming president of South Africa. He could have been a Lord of Scarcity. He could have said, well, I'm just going to emulate the oppressed, right? They oppressed me, and now I'm going to oppress them. I'm going to become one of them. He didn't. He brought people to the table. He brought everybody together, right? He wanted to show love for everybody. Righteous, the super righteous, right? This guy spent a lot of time, right, in prison, and they abused him, they tortured him, but he wasn't having it. He wasn't going to emulate the Lords of Scarcity, the oppressors. He was going to do it the other way, right? Emulate the great teacher. All right, so we're going to move on. We're going to talk about soccer. We're going to talk about a little pop culture. Again, it was hot on the rugby pitch yesterday, so excuse me, I'm going to take some water here. Pele. Talk about Pele. Pele was born in 1940. Who is Pele if you don't know? He's a retired Brazilian footballer, right? In America, they'd say soccer player. He was labeled the greatest by FIFA, the International Governing Board of Association Football or Soccer. Like the self-proclaimed greatest of all time, right? The GOAT, Muhammad Ali, the boxer, Pele was a black athlete, right? They're both black. Muhammad Ali, black. Pele, black. But unlike Ali, Pele was not outspoken about social and political affairs. No, he wasn't. He's basically mum on the issue. And he's been criticized. He was criticized then for that, right? There were people, so not everybody, but some people who wanted Pele to be more like Muhammad Ali, more outspoken, right? Like Ali said, the Viet Cong never called me the N-word, right? He refused induction to fight in the Vietnam War, right? As a result, they stripped him of his titles. I did a whole episode. You can, check out my library. You can watch that episode if you're interested. But anyway, certain people wanted Pele to be more like Ali, right? They're like, you're a black athlete. You're the greatest football player. You have the world stage, right? Say something, right? But Pele didn't believe that was his purpose, right? And especially after the coup, right, in 1964, he didn't feel like that was his purpose. People were being tortured and exiled and even killed, some dissidents. And he really felt that his purpose was to bring hope through his craft, which is soccer, bring hope to the people of Brazil, right? And he was marvelous at it, right? He was the greatest. So in terms of the World Cup, because 1970 World Cup is part of the title of the episode, Uruguay had won 2 of the first World Cups. Italy had won 2, so they had 2 each. And then West Germany won the 5th World Cup. So we're entering the 6th World Cup. Brazil had never won a World Cup yet. But Pele hadn't played in a World Cup yet. At just 17 years of age, Pele led Brazil to their first World Cup victory. Matter of fact, in the 1958 semifinal, Brazil against France, Pele became the youngest player to achieve a hat trick. A hat trick is when you scored 3 goals in the same game. He became the youngest player to do that. And then he added 2 more in the final. That was the semifinal. They went on to the final. He added 2 more, and Brazil beat Sweden 5-2 in Stockholm to win their first World Cup. Big deal, right? Huge, right? Brazil hadn't won a World Cup before. So it's 1958. So it's before the coup that we had talked about earlier that put Paulo Freire into exile. So then 4 years later, Brazil's back at it, right? They're in the World Cup. However, in the second game, it's 1962, in the second game of that World Cup, Pele got injured. And so for the bulk of the games, for the bulk of the World tournament, the World Cup, he couldn't play. Nonetheless, Brazil wins, right? 1962, they win their second in a row, right? So now they're tied with Uruguay and Italy. 3 nations with 2 World Cup victories. Then enter 1966, right? So now we're, Freire's in exile. The coup happened. The military's in charge of Brazil, and Pele's still, playing. He's the greatest. And so Brazil's back, competing in the World Cup. It's 1966. But what happens, they end up getting eliminated in the first round. And they don't even go on past the knockout round. So it's a huge disappointment, right? Huge disappointment for the nation, for Pele. Pele's still making money, right? He's still one of the best paid athletes in the world at the time. He's still competing. But it was just a huge disappointment for the national team of Brazil and the nation, right? The fans, the supporters. So now enter 1970, the 1970 World Cup. 4 years later, Pele actually did want to play. He didn't want to play in the 1970 World Cup. He figured, I got my 2 World Cup victories. I got money. I'm known as the greatest, and I don't need this, right? I don't need it. But the people of Brazil needed it, right? The military dictatorship had been in for a while now, right? It's 1970. They're doing their thing, right? They're lords of scarcity. They're torturing, they're killing, right? They're exiling folk, and it's going on. It's been going on for a few years now, or several years, and so the people are losing hope, right? The people of Brazil are losing hope, so they convince Pele to play. They're like, we need you. We need hope. We need to, win. Like, we need something to celebrate, a bit of a relief from all this oppression. And so he ends up agreeing. He ends up agreeing to play. And so then what happens in 1970? Well, Brazil makes it to the final. They make it to the World Cup final. And they play Italy at Estadio Azteca. They're in Mexico City. The final is at Estadio Azteca in front of 107,000 plus fans. Huge, right? Millions and millions and millions watching across the globe. And Pele ends up scoring the opening goal, right? He sets the tone, right? And there's this iconic photo, of him celebrating with his Brazilian teammates, the goal he scores at the opening of that game. And then he ends up assisting on the third and the fourth goal. And, Brazil ends up beating Italy 4-1. They end up becoming the first nation to win third World Cups. Pele's the only player to win 3 World Cups. Huge celebration in Brazil, right? For a moment in time, it's like there's no military dictatorship because people are celebrating. They get that bit of relief, that bit of hope that they're looking for, that encouraged Pele to play. Because, again, originally he didn't want to play, but he didn't. And so he really believed that was his purpose, right? To provide that hope to his people versus being, outspoken like Muhammad Ali. So that's the 1970 World Cup. Now moving on to Argentina. We're going to stay in South America. Moving on to Argentina. What is La Fundación Espartanos, the Spartans Foundation? What is it? Well, it was started in 2009 in Argentina. And what the Spartans Foundation does, novel idea and successful, they teach rugby, the game of rugby, right? Arguably the greatest game in the world. I know a lot would say soccer, but anyhow, they teach the game of rugby to prisoners. Yes, prisoners. You see the recidivism rate in Argentina is just about 50%. What does that mean? It means for every 2 that go to prison and get out, 1 ends up going back, right? But not with the Spartans Foundation. With the Spartans Foundation, miraculously, the prisoners who go through the Spartans Foundation program, only 1 in 20, not 1 in 2, 1 in 20, put a 0 behind that too, 1 in 20 end up going back to prison. So a hugely successful program. And as a result, it spread, right? It spread to 58 federal and provincial prisons in Argentina. It's spread to other countries. It's in Portugal. It is in Uruguay. It's in Spain. So it's spread now to other countries. And so what it does is it works on 4 pillars. Obviously, rugby. It also works on spirituality. They address spirituality. They address education, like Paulo Freire, right? They address education. And then also job preparedness. So those are the 4 pillars of the Spartans Foundation program. Why am I bringing this up? Well, I've done a episode, right, on the prison industrial complex, right? Remember that episode with Angela Davis, which is actually, I think to date, still my most viewed episode. There's well over 500 people watched that episode. At the end of the episode, I got into a little bit about, looking past the prison industrial complex and, what the alternatives are. Well, when we look past the prison industrial complex, there's hope, right? There's successful programs out there. We have the data of programs out there like the Spartans Foundation and others that are native to America that are successful, right? And unfortunately, the Lord of the Scarcity, they make so much money off the prison industrial complex. And I've named those corporations before that they don't want, right? They don't want programs like the Spartans Foundation here. Sometimes they leak in, though. Sometimes they leak in, side door, back door, whatever. But there's hope. There's hope beyond the prison industrial complex. So the other day somebody said this to me, but I see it across the internet all the time. Somebody said, we are energy and energy cannot be destroyed. And so I thought about this, right? Now I was going to say something, but I held back. I thought about this. I reflected on it, right? Did a little praxis, right? Like Paulo Freire taught. And so here's my response to that statement. The great teacher never said that. The great teacher never said, I am energy and energy cannot be destroyed. No, he never said that. What the great teacher said was this. The great teacher said, destroy this temple and in 3 days, what did he say? In 3 days I will raise it up. Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. Right? It was a prophecy. It came to pass, right? The Lord's the scarcity of his time, right? They ended up heinously torturing, killing, right, on the cross, crucified the great teacher, right? But he had prophesied that if you destroy the temple, I'll raise it up, right? I'll raise from the dead. See, the great teacher understood we're not just energy, right? We're not just spirit. We're body and spirit, right? We're material and spirit. That's why he called it the temple. He didn't call his body just the body or material. He understood that the divine lives within us, right? Our bodies are the temple of the divine. That's why he didn't just say, I am energy and energy cannot be destroyed. No, he said, destroy this temple where the divine lives, right? Where the divine dwells. I will raise it up in 3 days. Immortality act number 1. Then what does he do after he raises himself from the dead? He ends up raising to heaven alive in his physical body. Immortality act number 2. So the other day somebody asked me this question. They said, but Beto, is it not true that everything in nature ages and dies? And my response was this: no! That's not true. That's a lie perpetrated by the lords of scarcity who are nourished by what? Aging and death. Right? So they put that lie out there. Well, Beto, but what's the evidence? What's the evidence? Everywhere I see aging and death, right? The lords of scarcity have spoken all the aging and death into existence, so that's just a natural fact. First of all, remember what Maya Angelou said, facts obscure the truth, right? But second of all, it's not even a fact. And I've talked about lobsters in the past, so I'm not going to use the example of lobsters again. But I'm going to use the example of the hydra. If you don't know what the hydra is, Hydra, you can look it up. The hydra is a freshwater animal that neither ages nor dies. Okay, so not everything in nature ages and dies. The hydra actually replaces every cell in its body every 20 days. Interestingly enough, our human bodies, right, our temples of the divine, also regenerate themselves. Not every 20 days, but nearly our entire bodies are regenerated every couple of years, every few years. That's true. That's science. It's science. The hydra is immortal, impervious to aging and death, unless it is taken out of its natural environment. You see, we are created by the divine, in the image of the divine, designed to be immortal. Why aren't we? Why hasn't immortality manifested? Why are people still aging and dying, perishing? It's because of this. We're not in our natural spiritual environment. We're in the environment or the reality created by the lords of scarcity, right? It's still the fourth world, and middle-class poor folk, we're still emulating the lords of scarcity, right? Nourished by what? Aging and death, right? We got to look beyond that. We got to stop emulating them, right? Start emulating righteous folk, and I've given examples today, right? Paulo Freire, right? Nelson Mandela, the great teacher, right? We got to start emulating the righteous, right? So that we can usher in the fifth son, right? And we can live in abundance, right? Abundance is none of this I have and you don't have stuff, right? That's the Lord's of scarcity, right? I am because I have, and you don't have because I have more. That's none of that stuff, right? We got to get into our natural spiritual environment, which is about abundance for all, right? And when I talk about abundance, I'm not talking about man-made money, right? I'm not talking about man-made money. Yes, shelter is important, right? Clothes are important. I get all that, right? Folk live in the suburbs. They need a car to drive into the city, go to work. I get all that, right? Material possessions are important. But when we're talking about abundance, it's not just that, right? Although, again, that's important, right? Like Paulo Freire said, I couldn't focus on my studies because I was hungry. People need food, right? However, there's other things that, when we talk about abundance, it's not just that. There's other things, right? There's love, right? The priceless currency of love, right? There's peace, right? We talked about the military coup. That's not peace. That's the opposite of peace. Abundance is about peace. It's about harmony, living in harmony with each other in nature, like what Nelson Mandela was out to do, right? He wasn't out to emulate the oppressor. He was out to bring people together, right, in harmony. And it's also about time. And that's the key one here. It's about the currency, the priceless currency of time, the divine made currency of time. Because time is not meant to be scarce. It's meant to be abundant. Why? Because we were created in the image of the divine, right? Who's not ageless, right? We don't talk about how the divine's, oh, pobrecito, the divine's getting old, right? Aging and knocking on, death's door. No, the divine doesn't age and doesn't die, right? The great teacher, right? You can destroy this temple, I will raise it up. Why? Because the great teacher understood we're created in the image of the divine to be immortal, not just energy, spirit and body, right? Material as well. So I'm going to go ahead and end there. Yep, sure enough, I've gone over time, as is my custom, but I thank you for all who are watching and who've watched until the end. I really appreciate you. And those of you who had to cut out early or didn't catch the beginning, I will be posting the recorded video so you can go back and watch any of it. All of my videos are posted. You can go to my website, dailydivinitycoach.com, my YouTube page, Beto, aka Daily Divinity Coach, and even here on Facebook, if you scroll through my timeline, you can find past recordings of videos, so you can watch any of it. So if you missed any part of it, I will be posting this video. I am so grateful for you joining today. Those of you joining live, as well as those watching the recorded video, very grateful for this opportunity to share this information. And I hope you have a blessed rest of your day or evening, wherever you may be, and that you come back next week. I'm here every Sunday. And, next week is episode number 44. And it'll be awesome. It'll be tremendous. So hopefully you can join next week. But again, blessings. I'm going to go ahead and turn this off now. And may you have a blessed rest of your day or evening, wherever you may be.